Hey there, Jordan Sheridan, live Status Coup, Friday, March 3rd, 2023, right here in the United Corporations of America. Have a very, very busy show, a lot to get to. Obviously, today marks a month since this really horrendous, horrible derailment and then controlled burn, I put in air quotes. We have been covering this pretty much all the way. I think really one of the top news outlets covering this. So we have a lot of developments. If you don't know, there was a town hall last night or an open house that the EPA put on. A surprise guest was a Norfolk Southern lobbyist. So we'll have clips from that. We also are going to get into some head scratching pronouncements from the EPA. They decided a month later to tell kids not to play by the creek that's contaminated. So good thing kids were playing by the creek for a month before the EPA decided to speak up. But we're going to get to guests right away. So buckle up. Please smash that like button. If you don't know, there have been, obviously the EPA has been in town, but there's also been rail workers part of the cleanup at the site of the derailment. And contrary to the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, who, when asked about it the other day, if he was aware of any rail workers who had any symptoms, he said, not that I'm aware of. Well, there are some rail workers that are helping with the cleanup that do have symptoms. Let's just show this quick section of that video. Oh, you don't have that? That's fine. This was the letter that was sent by the rail workers and
I have
union.
it now, sorry.
Oh, you have it? Okay, play it.
And now union leaders say the rail workers who've been helping in the cleanup are experiencing migraines and nausea. In a letter to the governor and to the transportation secretary, the unions accused Norfolk Southern of putting workers at risk by not providing personal protective gear. CNN's Isaac Dover joining us now. So, Isaac, how are officials responding here to these health concerns, and perhaps most importantly, what's actually being done for these workers?
Yeah, well, look, we've heard from some of the residents of East Palestine about the nosebleeds and other ways that they've been getting sick, but now union workers speaking out saying that they have been getting sick as well.
What about the rail workers involved in the cleanup? Are they showing any symptoms themselves?
I'm not aware of that at all. You know, they have been to, Fran and I stood there, watched them do the work they're doing. It's an amazing operation.
So the governor, boy, he received a letter March 1st from the Teamsters with concern about railroad workers who are at the derailment site and are experiencing health symptoms, but guess he doesn't read his letters. He said he wasn't aware of any symptoms from rail workers. Joining us now is Matt Weaver. You are a rail worker, I believe, since the 90s, so a long time. You are very active, you know, in the, you know, the what would have been a strike last year if it wasn't stopped. And you have been involved with this East Palestine disaster. Can you first talk about, just since this happened, A, was it a surprise to you? And B, can you kind of talk about your knowledge that a lot of your colleagues that have been part of the cleanup are now experiencing some symptoms?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Yes, I have, you know, Railroad Workers United has, you know, said that things like this are going to happen. The effects of a corrupted business model, precision scheduled railroading, PSR, do more with less. And now it's more like do less with less, where they're not moving as much freight as they used to, and record profit margins. It's all about keeping the shareholders happy. And they've cut jobs up to 30% of the manpower since 2015. and we've seen deferred maintenance, and unfortunately, this is what's going to happen. It's very frustrating to see this stuff. We've got, no other industry has a profit margin. They're shooting for 55 profits of 45 cents on a dollar that they gross. And, fast food is looking to get 85, 90, so it's a shocking bit of news. And this has been predicted.
And can I ask you, because it's almost like 2 + 2 does not equal 4 in East Palestine. The governor kind of vaguely talks, some residents have some symptoms, but doesn't seem to be recognizing that it's kind of widespread in the community. We've come across folks, diarrhea, vomiting, sore throat, chemical burns, dizziness, nausea, headaches. I mean, the list goes on. But he kind of in interviews has said, well, I spoke with kids in school and they seem fine. And he said he wasn't aware that rail workers that are part of the cleanup are having symptoms. What have you heard from colleagues that are there part of the cleanup?
When I was there last Friday, I went to the town hall, and it was people weren't complaining. There were stories of people with these troubles, but a lot of people were worried about the long-term risks. That was the big concern that people were worried about. What's this going to be in 20 years? Cancer cluster kind of stuff. That's what they were concerned about. The fact that they got the railroad put back together and running in less than 10 minutes after the evacuation order was removed. That's some scary stuff. I believe it was, less than 10 minutes that they had trains running, and then they said, oh, people can go home. The guys that we had working there are reporting these issues, and the union is putting together statements, and we're trying to get the point out there that they needed better protection, and we need to make sure that we protect rail labor as well as the profit margin. That's it seems very frustrating. We went from essential employees during the pandemic. I had a piece of paper in my lunchbox to show an officer if I got pulled over during quarantine, to expendable when it came to bargaining. Essential to expendable in, with a look at the ticker tape. Ask the shareholders what they want. Well, we want more money. It's frustrating.
And can I ask you also, the governor and some others kind of made statements that alluded to the firefighters who originally went to put out the fire weren't aware of what the chemicals were on that train. They weren't told. I know you're not with the firefighters, but to your knowledge, were the workers that from the rail unions that went down to help with the cleanup, were they told what chemicals, all the chemicals that were on that train, or were they provided the proper respirators, PPE, etc.?
I don't believe they were. The interview that you had shown with Johnny Long and Peter Kennedy said they were in jeans and leather boots and leather gloves, and the crew gave the consist over to the authorities. They only mentioned 1 or 2 of the chemicals. They didn't announce everything, and our guys went to work as well as the firefighters without knowing exactly what they're getting into.
And lastly, not to get too heavy on you, but I'm talking to residents whose homes smell like gas stations. I've heard formaldehyde, diesel. They can't be in their homes longer than half hour before they want to vomit, dizzy, etc. But Norfolk Southern is basically cutting them off for reimbursements past like 4 days at a hotel, or we'll only give them $1,000. We've heard all their pontificating that we're going to spend whatever we need to spend and we're going to be there for the community. This is not your first rodeo with greedy rail companies. But, just what's your response? We know about all the greed that led to this, the lobbying, cutting corners. But after the fact, it seems from our conversations with residents, they're basically nickel and diming a lot of residents who it is not safe to go back to their homes, regardless of what, the tests say.
I think that, perhaps we need the railroad to act in good faith, and it shouldn't take a lawsuit to get them to do the right thing. It's pretty frustrating. Let's take care of these people. Let's make sure their needs are taken care of, because this disruption in their lives, you heard the NTSB was 100% preventable.
And one more, not to make it too political, but I have to ask, it's not to say, if the rail workers were allowed to go on strike, which by law should have been your right at the end of last year to go on strike. It's not to say it would have prevented this, but I interviewed rail workers who, one of the big things that you wanted to go on strike about was understaffing, the thinning out of the workforce by 30% over the last decade, 2 workers for 150 train cars, outdated brake systems. We can't say it wouldn't have happened, but what are your thoughts now? Obviously, President Biden and Congress blocked you from going on strike. Do you think that would have made some type of difference?
I think perhaps it would have, had we been able to push. My brothers and sisters in transportation, the engineers and conductors, have terrible on-call times, extra boards, working conditions where they are on call, or they're away from home hotel and they're getting their rest time away from their families. It's really a frustrating way of life. It's about, pay, benefits, job security, working conditions, and retirement, the whole package. And raises were fair, but the whole package wasn't perfect. A perfect hard thing to reach on, but it wasn't enough. And more than half of rail labor voted no on the contract, the tentative agreement that came out. And then they imposed a contract on us. And even the shippers who were on our side with the STB hearings, saying that they need to hire more people, they need to serve the customers, and doing that with more employees. And then the shippers, just before we were going to be able to go on strike, called on Congress to impose the agreement. It's kind of frustrating. I guess it shows the power we have, though.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for joining me, and I'm hoping we're not going to need a Jon Stewart type to get some attention, sadly, if first responders and rail workers are having some serious health problems down the road, because God knows what your rail workers who were there helping with the cleanup inhaled, and hopefully whatever their health symptoms now are short-term and not long-term. So
it's a pretty common kind of thing with Federal Employees Liability Act. And I have, with guys I've worked with, I've buried as many as 9 guys, 7 from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and 2 with esophageal cancer. And only 2 or 3 of those guys got to retirement. It's working conditions need to be addressed here.
Thanks so much, Matt. Rail Workers United, been a rail worker since the 90s. We'll be in touch.
Thanks so much. You guys have a great weekend.
Absolutely. Smash that like button. Got 300 people watching, but we can get a lot more. Joining me now is somebody much smarter, Stephen Lester, who's kind of been a go-to expert in the weeks after this horrible derailment, controlled burn that they're calling it. Lewis, who was on the ground for us, spoke with you last week after the community meeting where you spoke about dioxins, which, correct me if I'm wrong, are a very dangerous toxin that is formed from the combustion of vinyl chloride, which was the main chemical on that train. And when you spoke last week at the community meeting, at that point, the EPA was not testing for it. And now the EPA has announced they are testing for it, but the catch is Norfolk Southern, the train company, is going to be doing the testing, and EPA says they'll be overseeing it, which I, for one, think is very backwards. But let's just start for those who don't know. Can you kind of explain why you were concerned that they were not testing for dioxin, and what exactly is the threat of dioxin in the air, water, and soil?
Sure. Hi, Matt. Thanks for inviting me to be on your show here today. My name is Stephen Lester. and I'm with an organization called the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice, and we're based in Falls Church, Virginia. And we've done a lot of work with dioxins over the years. It is a very toxic substance, often considered one of the most toxic chemicals ever tested. It is not found, it is not generated or made by anything. It's not a product. It's a byproduct of a variety of different kinds of industrial processes that involve chlorine. There are probably 25 or 30, there's 75 total dioxins that exist, but only typically 17 of them are analyzed for when we look in the environment. The thing that worries me the most about dioxin is, and in a situation like this, is that when you have 5 tanker trucks of dioxins that were dumped and burned, that it's going to create these dioxins. It's in the exact dioxins are formed in burning when on the surface of particulate matter. So all that black smoke that people saw in all those images that were shown when they were burning this stuff, that black smoke was a perfect furnace and place for dioxins to form. And so I'm very worried that the dioxins were in that cloud, that they settled on people's property in some distance away, and people as much as 15 miles away. At the meeting that I attended last week, talked about ashes from the fire landing on their property. So it can travel quite some distance, which is what we understand typically from dioxin, is that it does travel long distances. There are people up in the Arctic and that have nowhere near any sources of dioxin, that have dioxin in their bodies, and so it does move in the air.
Let me also just give you your full. Hold on, Center for let me give you your full bio, because my dad brain clicked in there. You're with the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice. You're the science director there, and you've been studying this and other toxins for a long, long time. I want to also ask you, just the EPA, their given reason for why they were testing for this is they said it's kind of just, in the environment anyways, and there's no baseline for it. They said we don't have a baseline for what the levels in East Palestine were before, so the testing would kind of not be accurate or useful. I didn't really understand that, because whether you have a baseline for what it was before, the EPA does have allowable limits for most chemicals and toxins. So you would be able to test to see, are the levels now higher than your allowable limit?
That's right. I mean, that statement made absolutely no sense. It was an attempt, I think, to just divert from what they need to do, which was to test for dioxins. If they analyze for it, I'm certain they will find it. And if the levels are high, they will understand that. I mean, the EPA spent close to 30 years analyzing and looking at dioxins. There's a long history in the agency of looking at and researching the risks of this chemical. This is not a new chemical. It's not something that nobody's heard about. Maybe the public hasn't heard about it. That's possible. But researchers, scientists, toxicologists, EPA as an institution is very well familiar with this. So to say something like that is not at all sensible. And it makes no sense. There's plenty, as you said, of standards and guidelines and processes for figuring out if this level is high or if it's not, or if it's typical of what we find in the environment. So it's a good thing now that EPA has acknowledged that they will do some testing for dioxin. But this next step raises just a whole host of new questions, because the company is being required to do it. It's not going to be done by the agencies, although there's some questions about who's going to actually do this testing, at least that I've heard. So I'm very concerned that the company that's responsible for this accident is being asked to do the testing. If they were interested in doing, this kind of testing, initially they would have done it when they did the test burn. That's the time to test in the air. It's remarkable to me as a public health scientist that people could have sat around on that to try to figure out what to do with those burning, dislodged tanker trucks, and there wasn't a public health scientist there saying, okay, if we're going to have to burn it, and there's a long history of burning these chlorinated chemicals creating dioxins. It's one of the most toxic chemicals ever tested. We need to do some testing of the air and monitor the air while we do the burn. We need to know so that we can tell people what risks they face. Clearly, there was nobody like that in that group.
And I know you're not like a government official, but I'm like from a common sense perspective, wouldn't you want to keep people evacuated until you do some thorough testing for this, particularly the people next to the creeks, but people right in the blast zone? I mean, you saw that mushroom cloud. Does anybody think it stopped at the 1 mile city limits? It does. I mean, obviously, a lot of people think that they brought folks back because the company could not move the train if the town was evacuated. It's just mind-boggling to me that 4,500 people were not kept away until you did some preliminary testing, not just for dioxins, but for everything.
Right. Dioxin is one chemical. You're exactly right. There are a lot of chemicals that people are being exposed to there. I've had some experience with the crises before because I worked at Love Canal. I was brought in as a science advisor to the residents who lived at Love Canal. That's more than 40 years ago. And in that crisis, people were like they are here, raising all kinds of questions because they've been exposed to the chemicals. That was a landfill, and the landfill did two things to spread into the community. One, it traveled underground and seeped into people's basements, and also it came to the surface and people were breathing the chemicals from the air. And so at that time, there was very little experience for the government and the public agencies to try to figure out how to do this. But today, 40 years later, we have a great deal more understanding about chemicals and exposures and ways to respond to things like community exposures like this. But none of that seems to be happening here. None of that experience has been transferred. None of that understanding of how to respond has made it to East Palestine yet. It's remarkable to me that I was there last week for a couple of days, and I'm seeing these workers all around the town cleaning up the creek and cleaning up this. And as was mentioned in the earlier piece, that the workers aren't wearing any kind of protective gear. I mean, just aside from what the community, the people living there are experiencing, the guys cleaning up and providing these remedial measures. I mean, they were aerating the water. There's an awful lot of soluble toxic chemicals, water-soluble chemicals that got into the water. And they're aerating them to eliminate them from the water. And what they're doing is putting it into the air. And if you go to anywhere near those aerators, you can smell those chemicals. I actually saw media interviewing people in front of the creek down there, and you could smell the chemicals. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with you people? Well, how can
we got video? A couple residents and a resident from Flint went down there to take soil samples and water samples, and they were noticeably getting more. I guess they called it like loopy and almost like the feeling that you're under the influence of something.
Right. Well, that's what all of these chemicals, these volatile chemicals, affect the central nervous system. So that is not surprising. But, I was talking to one of the local leaders in the community, and she told me that, these creeks that run through the town, many of them go under the buildings. I mean, the one goes right under City Hall, and she was telling me that she was there the day before, and she could smell the chemicals in City Hall. And, these creeks also run under the high school. And it's like, you have to wonder, like, what are the kids going to the high school? What are they being exposed to? What are the workers being exposed to? What are the people working in the city hall being exposed to? And that's the problem with all of these questions that people are asking. Very, very important and reasonable questions. What can I grow? Can I, can I do my crop this year? These are farmers, and they want to know whether their crops are going to be contaminated with chemicals. Can I get kids play in the yard? reasonable and important questions. And it's hard to answer those questions, except in a very precautionary way, without information on the chemicals in the soil. And, I mean, that EPA is going to do testing now, I think is good, but there's a lot of questions about, I mean, I think that the EPA should require this company to create a sampling plan. If they're going to do sampling, they need to create a sampling plan that they make available to the public so people can review it and understand it and change it, perhaps, if it's not going to be addressing the questions they're asking. So they have to have a sampling plan that's transparent and clear what they're going to sample for. And I mean that first in terms of, are they going to sample the air? They're going to sample the surface soil? Are they going to sample the sediment and the water? What are they going to sample? The next question would be, okay, how many samples are you going to take and from which medium? The third question would be, where are you going to take these samples? What's the location? And the next question is, how are you going to take these samples? I mean, a soil sample can be taken in a variety of ways. I mean, you can take a scoop and take a sliver and put it in a jar and call that a sample. That's called a I'm blanking on the word, but there's a term for it, a scoop sample. And then you can take what's called a composite sample, where you identify a point and take 5 samples from like 2 feet away from that in 5 locations and combine them into a composite sample. There's a lot of, and then there's the procedures of how you actually collect them, the samples. And then there's the analytical procedures. What are you going to look for? I mean, there's a standard test for dioxin, for example, of 17 different components in the mixture of dioxins. That's a standard. That's what I would expect them to do here. Anything less than that would not be appropriate.
Well, I have question number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. Why is the EPA having the company that caused this conducting the testing? I'm not asking you to get political, but it's like police investigating themselves. The fox guarding the hen house. They do not want to find levels of dioxin because they're already going to be facing hundreds of millions of dollars in a settlement. It just makes no sense. The federal government has money. Last time I checked, you had said originally that the EPA, you didn't think they wanted to test for this because they were likely going to find it. It's a long cleanup. You don't clean up dioxin right away, and it would cost a lot of money.
Well, that's right. I don't know why the company's being asked to do it. I'm really surprised that EPA is not taking this on themselves. They said that they were going to take the lead in doing the cleanup, but everything I'm seeing right now, since they've said that, it doesn't imply that anything different has changed. Anything has changed, that they're seemingly operating the same way with the company in charge. I'm not happy that the company's put in charge of doing this testing. And the only way I think that that the public can be assured that anything they do will be believable is if they have a transparent sampling plan that they put out for public comment that people can review and criticize if needed and make changes as needed. But the other thing I think needs to happen is that the community needs to have a scientist that they can trust that's a part of this process. There's so much technical information being put out there right now that they're really at a disadvantage without somebody there that's with them that can address the kind of questions that I'm raising and talk about the kind of things I'm raising, and I think that really is important. The company, I heard talking to one of the leaders this morning, she told me that EPA is going to come in and do some air testing. But first they're going to go somewhere else and do some background samples. And then, this was from the meeting last night that you'd mentioned. And then they're going to come and do some air samples around the site. And if there's not any different than the background, then they're going to done. They're not going to do any more sampling. Well, first of all, that sounds to me like they're doing air sampling. That doesn't make sense. I mean, the horse is gone, so to speak. The smoke has settled. The dioxin, if it was there, is not a volatile chemical. It would have been in the dust and in the particulates that were generated. So to do air sampling now is not what people need to answer their questions about whether they can play in their yard or whether they can grow crops or whether their animals are safe. that's not what they need. They need testing of the soil. It has to be the surface soil where the contaminants would have settled. And so, until we see what they're doing, um, we can't really believe that what they're going to do is going to answer the questions. At least I can't.
And bad on my part, I should have asked you this right at the top. Could you tell people, because we do have people from the community that are watching, but just anybody, what are the health hazards of dioxin? I know it can cause cancer, but there are other things as well.
Yeah, the cancer risk, it's one of the most potent carcinogens ever tested. I mean, it causes lung cancer, prostate cancer, a variety of different kinds of cancer. But it also affects development. It can cause IQ deficits. It affects reproductive outcomes, can cause infertility and a variety of birth defects. It affects the skin, the heart, can cause diabetes, it affects hormones. It's a very diverse chemical and hits a variety of different parts of the body. It's a very toxic and dangerous chemical. And at very low levels, that's the thing that makes it so unique. It causes damage in the parts per trillion. I mean, we usually think of things in the parts per million as being very low. This is 100,000 times lower than that. And that's what makes this chemical what it is.
And isn't it not isn't it not fat soluble?
It is fat soluble. So
it is.
it will store in fat of people if they're exposed. It will store in animals, cattle, for example, that graze on grass where dioxin has settled. And this is not just me talking. This has been researched and documented. This is how part of the life cycle of dioxin. It often researchers from New York looked at cattle, some in rural areas, far from any specific source of dioxin, and they found dioxin in the milk, in the cheese, in the fat of these animals, in the meat, and particularly the marbled meat where that has a lot of fat, and it accumulates in the animals, and it bioaccumulates, in the sense that it continues to increase the longer these exposures continue.
And how does weather play a factor? You said the smoke is settled, but if it's in the soil, rain, wind, does that kind of move dioxin around?
It can, but dioxin is a complex chemical. It's a large chemical. It's going to be pretty stable where it sits. It's not to say that surface water couldn't move it. I think it could, just like it could move dirt and dust. So that can happen, but it's not very soluble in water, so it's not likely to be picked up in water. If it lands in a creek or in a stream, it's going to settle in the sediment. So you'll find it not so much in the water, but in the areas below. I mean, I think that's one reason why when people talk about when they throw rocks or bricks or something into the water and all of a sudden it changes color and they see things that they're concerned about. And that's because the sediment's being disturbed by, a rock that lands on it. Mm-hmm. And so wind especially can remobilize the dioxin, because again, it's in the surface dirt and the soil and the dust. So that's troubling, especially in hot weather when things dry out, the surface dries out and can get mobilized. It's one of the reasons I was worried when I saw these dust trucks, going through town and through parts of the city, the town there, because if that's dioxin contaminated dirt that they're moving, they're just kicking it back up and recirculating it, and it's moving again to somebody else or back again to somebody who might not have been exposed the first time.
And can I ask you also, Texas A&M did some independent testing. Their level, they found some different levels than the EPA did, specifically higher levels of Aqualine. Mm-hmm. Can you describe what Aqualine is and why that might pose a threat if it's in high levels?
Sure. Aqualine is actually another component in the production of plastics. And so it's used that's why it exists. And so it also affects the central nervous system and is an upper respiratory irritant. So it can cause a variety of impacts in the nose and the head. So it's not known to cause cancer, but it's not been studied for that purpose. So it's not, we don't know whether it can cause long-term effects. but it just contributes. I mean, so many of the chemicals that were in on the train that are included on the list that EPA and others have made available are central nervous system poisons. And upper respiratory irritants. So that's a lot of what we're seeing and the symptoms that people are showing with the headaches, with the nosebleeds, with the runny noses, with the allergic type reactions. All of that is consistent. And you can pick out one chemical and say, well, maybe this one's not so bad or this one's that, but no one's exposed to one chemical. They're exposed to the mixture. And if you have 15 chemicals or 12 chemicals that are all affecting the central nervous system, maybe one doesn't do the trick, so to speak. Maybe one you don't react to, but 10 or 12 of them you're going to react to. That's what we're seeing, and not for everybody. That's the complex part of chemical exposures is, some people will react where others don't. It doesn't mean that it's not dangerous or that it's okay. It just means that there's differences in how we react. And that for years the industry trotted out the cigarette smoker for 30 years smoked, never had lung cancer. And so that doesn't speak to the fact that cigarette smoking is safe for some people. It speaks to what we don't understand as scientists about why that happens.
Right.
Why some people we know can get cancer for smoking for a short bit and other people don't. And it's the same with the chemicals. Different people react and others do and don't. And so we don't, as scientists, truly understand the differences. We know a great deal about the health effects of dioxin and lead and a few other chemicals. But why some people react and others don't is very complex and something we really can't quite understand as scientists.
And I'll say it. You don't need to say it. But I mean, Erin Brockovich calls this a cover up. I've been to Flint many times. I've seen the EPA manipulate testing. I've seen the EPA look the other way when state environmental departments manipulate testing. I find it odd that Texas A&M, I believe, has far less resources than the federal EPA, is finding higher levels of things like Aqualine. Can you kind of talk about what? I mean, you can't get in the EPA's head, but why is the independent testing showing such differences for certain chemicals?
Yeah, I don't understand at all EPA's response here. It is baffling to me. I've never been a big fan, quite honestly, of the agency because, we deal with communities dealing in toxics all over the country. And there are always questions about what EPA does or what the state agencies do. But this is really baffling here, why the agency has not taken a more aggressive and public health oriented role. I mean, their mission, you will go to their website, EPA's mission on their website says, we're here to protect public health and the environment. That's not what they've done here. That is not at all the way they've responded to this situation. They have not come in with a public health approach to try to understand what is going on in this environment and what's happening to the people here. It's just even going back to Love Canal days when I didn't understand why the state of New York did. And I've been doing this for a long time. And these agencies are driven by something other than concern for the public and the people who are exposed to these chemicals. They're much more concerned about reassuring the public that everything is fine than they are in really trying to understand what's going on. It's their responsibility as an agency to understand what's going on here. The public relies on EPA to go in and do the proper testing and to look at the chemicals that people are being exposed to and to test them in the places where the people are, not somewhere else. And so the agency is trained to do this. Why they aren't doing this, I mean, your guess is probably better than mine, but it's clearly not because they care about the people in East Palestine. They couldn't and do the things they've done.
And can I ask you, you're not a meteorologist, but it doesn't take a rocket science to realize that the wind took that plume in many different directions. I mean, I've spoken with people saying they have symptoms in Western Pennsylvania, 15 to 20 miles north, west of East Palestine. I mean, people are talking about symptoms even in northeastern states. We can't directly, say it's connected, but a lot of the same symptoms. And we know that this did not stop at the city limits of East Palestine. Not that you're a doctor or anything, but, to people who have been feeling some of these things, sore throat, just not feeling themselves, rashes. in Pennsylvania, West Virginia. I've even gotten messages from people in Virginia. Can normal people, working people, like test for dioxin? I assume it's expensive. Not just dioxin, but what should people do who feel that after this, they're not feeling right themselves?
Yeah, there's no easy test for dioxin. It's a pretty complicated chemical to analyze for, primarily because you have to have a high resolution in your analytical equipment to get down to the levels where dioxin causes its adverse health effects. So it's not something the public can generally do. I don't have a good answer for that, quite honestly, because there's all we can really try to hope is that someone like the agency EPA will go out and do honest testing, clear testing, with the traditional methods, not some new approach that I understand that Norfolk Southern is proposing, some kind of fingerprint approach that they think will be able to identify whether the dioxin that's out in the environment was actually from their burn. There's no experience with doing something like that. There is experience with looking at some fingerprints. Some researchers have looked for this for like pulp and paper mills that have some pretty stable environments, and a little bit with wood treatment plants. But that's never been an accepted approach for analyzing dioxin. There's a standard approach that everybody uses who's concerned about dioxin, and that's to look for 17 isomers of dioxin. That's what they should be doing here. This is no place to experiment with something new that at best is going to save the company a lot of money by providing a shortcut to the cost of the testing, and worst, is not going to give people information about what's in the soil and where the places where they live. Right. And so I really hope that EPA will, that someone's going to throw a bucket of cold water on them and they'll say, oh yeah, what are we doing here, and change their approach and really take this bull by the horns and do the proper testing and do it right and do it in places where people are. So that they can begin to understand the risks that they're facing.
And last question, Colin, if you have the clip. Almost a month later, the EPA Administrator Michael Regan felt it was now the time to advise children not to play by the creeks. If we could play that.
For the time being, while the pollution is present, as a father, I would not advise anybody, adult or child, play in the creeks and streams. What we've said is the drinking water has been tested. If that drinking water has been tested and a green light has been given, then we feel confident in that. But while we're cleaning up this disaster site, I wouldn't advise that anyone play in water that's contaminated or soil that's contaminated. This is an ongoing effort to efficiently and effectively clean up the mess that Norfolk Southern caused. Thank you.
I don't know. Sounds kind of crazy to me that there wasn't signs by the creek. There wasn't a guidance by the EPA not to play, or it's not just children. People are jogging around this park. What are your thoughts on he's saying this a month later?
Well, I think that it speaks to the fact that they've done enough. They're now beginning to understand what people are being exposed to. That's what drove that statement, that they had more information about the levels of the chemicals in the water, and they're recognizing that people shouldn't be playing there. And so he's doing the right thing. And if they continue to do proper testing, I think you're going to see more and more of those kind of statements coming out, because they're going to continue to find it. And this is not even looking for dioxin. This is looking for other things. So I'm glad to hear that. It's late. People have been playing. What they need, again, I talked about a safety sampling plan for the new testing they're proposing, but they also need a safety plan for the cleanup that protects not just the workers, but the community. There hasn't been anything like that so far. Your first guest talked about how the workers are complaining of symptoms because they were out on that site cleaning up without any protective gear. And I've seen that in the guys working around the town and dealing with the contamination in the water. Somebody has to take control of what's happening at that community, and the cleanup is not being under any kind of control right now. And I feel for the workers who are the front line of what they're being exposed to, and I feel for the people who live there who are getting re-exposed in some cases because of not not anybody who understands what they're doing, but people not knowing what's in the soil that they're handling and dealing with. It's a mistake. What they're doing there. They got to do better. The people there deserve better.
Thank you, Stephen Lester, Science Director with the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice. Also wrote a piece about this, particularly dioxins, for The Guardian. So everybody check out his piece up on The Guardian. We'll definitely keep in touch.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sure. We got a lot more to get to, including last night, the EPA held a open house or town hall for the residents and had a surprise guest, a lobbyist from Norfolk Southern, the train company. Would you look at that? Was not advertised, but the Norfolk Southern sent a lobbyist to the community, and the community, rightly so, really let the EPA have it. Really let the EPA have it. Let Norfolk Southern have it. This is now 30 days. And I think, listen, there's 615 people watching. By the way, we are 70 subscribers on YouTube away from 137,000. So if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, can we get to 137,000 subscribers while we're live? I think so. Subscribe, because as far as I know, we are the only outlet that has been covering a petrochemical mushroom cloud that exploded over, frankly, several states, and is going to cause God knows how much generational health and societal damage. I think this is the #1 story in America. It's shameful that you have outlets like CNN, MSNBC, airing a full murder trial for some oligarch in South Carolina. They should be covering this 24/7 because people are hurting, not just in East Palestine, but the surrounding communities. And we're going to continue to cover it extensively. Before we get to some of the clips from last night's town hall, and it was heated, and I think you'll see that the EPA's answers were pathetic. I think you'll see that the Norfolk Southern was pathetic. They basically told the residents, no, we will not evacuate you, which, if you take anything away from my conversation with Stephen Lester and others, common sense. Do you think if this happened in the wealthiest community in Ohio, or the Upper West Side of New York City, or Beverly Hills, California, or name your rich white suburb or ritzy community, you think they would do the testing before evacuating people? Or do you think they'd evacuate people while they're testing and put them up in hotels or nicer? I think we know the answer. These people are poor. It is a impoverished area in Ohio, and they figured, you know what? Send them back. We're not going to spend the money to relocate almost 5,000 residents and their families, not to mention the animals. And hopefully it's okay. Same shit they did in Flint. Exactly. But before we get to clips, I just want to show two clips from. I want to show a few clips from yesterday because Erin Brockovich and her partner Bob Bocock were in town. I wasn't on the show yesterday, but I want to respond to this because I think Erin Brockovich, who, by the way, it came out today. I don't know if you have this article, Colin. I put it in there. It came out today that literally Ohio law enforcement put Erin Brockovich on a terrorist list. This is not The Onion. I am not making it up. Did I send that to you, Colin? Hold on. Yeah, it's the Yahoo News story. So Erin Brockovich was put on a law enforcement, put her on a special interest terrorism threat for her activism in East Palestine. Ohio law enforcement issued a report late last month warning that events planned in East Palestine by the environmental activist Erin Brockovich could prompt a terrorist threat from violent extremists, according to an intelligence bulletin obtained by Yahoo News. Dated February 24th, so about a week or so ago, and distributed to law enforcement agencies by the Department of Homeland Security, the Ohio Statewide Terrorism Analysis and Crime Center, Terrorism Analysis, I can't even say that, it's so long, assesses that special interest extremist groups will continue to call for changes in governmental policy, which may lead to protests in around East Palestine and or at the State House in Columbus. Yeah, you know, that terrorist, Erin Brockovich, committing the terror of saying 2 + 2 = 4, water is wet, and this is a cover-up. Somebody like Erin Brockovich coming into town, it's such a threat because she's actually telling the truth, unlike the corporate media who have been regurgitating the bullshit coming from the EPA, who have been regurgitating the bullshit coming from the governor of Ohio. We'll play that video later. We put up a video yesterday showing the governor of Ohio's constant lying about the health symptoms. He's pretending, oh, I don't know anything about health symptoms of residents or rail workers. What kind of dystopian 1984 Orwellian nightmare are we living that Erin Brockovich is such a threat to the Department of Homeland Security? And I'm definitely going to try to interview her and get a response about this, that Erin Brockovich is deemed a violent terrorism threat, or that a push for changes in governmental policy might lead to terrorism. You know what's terrorism? When a corporation like Norfolk Southern spends millions of dollars to lobby our government, i.e. purchase our government, both the Democrats and Republicans. They cut corners. They don't do basic upkeep of their trains. And because they cut corners, because they cut staff by 30%, the entire railroad industry, because they don't upgrade their brake systems that are as old as Abraham Lincoln, I'm not making that up. Some of these brake systems are as old as the 19th century, that a fucking bomb goes off over East Palestine, Ohio, and the surrounding communities, and people, I'm sorry to say, are going to have cancer and are going to die young. And kids are going to have their lives forever stained and permanently damaged. That's terrorism. Not Erin Brockovich, who's actually fucking telling the truth. Smash the like button, please. Smash that like button. Let's get more viewers in. We are 50 YouTube subscribers away from 137,000. So I hope 50 of you will sign up, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let me also give some shout outs, because we've been getting people to sign up as paid Status Coup members. We are sending Louis DeAngelis back to East Palestine in a week or so. So we will have Louis back on the ground, because we are not forgetting this story. We're just getting started, because when the cameras leave, and I've seen this in Flint and other places, when the mainstream media or the corporate media abandons these stories, and they do it every time, they cover it for a week or two and then it's done. That's when the real cover up begins. That's when the residents are left to fend for themselves. That's when the corporate greed and the cover your ass gets into high gear. That's when the companies, the government or the corporations, literally pay residents to infiltrate and become moles. They pay off certain residents to sow division. I've seen this in Flint and I've seen it elsewhere. So we're going to stay on this. Shout out to Linda, signed up as a Status Coup member. Jeffrey signed up as a Status Coup member. Joseph signed up as a Status Coup member. Joanne signed up as a Status Coup member. And Patrick. So that's 5 new members while we've been live. Please, if you have $5 to $10 a month, statuscoup.com/join. That's statuscoup.com/join. Become a member for $5 to $10 a month. It makes a huge, huge difference. We'll put the link in the chat, and the link is also in the description. There's a lot of independent, air quotes, independent outlets asking you for money. Most of the time, they're sitting comfy in a studio pontificating and bloviating about bullshit. We actually are investigating, and we actually go on the road, and we are independent. We don't have any money from big banks, fossil fuel companies, big pharma, big real estate, Silicon Valley, the military-industrial complex, or the scum buying off the Democrats and the Republicans. With all that said, and I will shout you out for all those who sign up while we're live. Let's play some of what Erin Brockovich said yesterday, Colin.
I've spent all morning with some of the residents, and I'm very upset. Obviously, they're very upset. I just could not believe the amount of information coming in that they have, that they want to share, that it seems like nobody is listening to. They are so afraid. They get so many mixed messages. They're getting a total runaround. They want help. They make a phone call. It goes to Norfolk. Then it says call EPA. EPA says call Norfolk. They don't know where to go. They want to leave. They don't have the means to leave. People aren't coming back. Their animals are sick. Their animals are dying. I've just seen pictures of them who go to their own doctor with holes in their throat, or they're being diagnosed with chemical respiratory illness, or these rashes that obviously look painful. Listen, this has been going on for 3 weeks since the initial crash. I think we're pushing a month now, actually, March 3rd. And yet nothing has really been done that is really giving them any kind of help or answer. It's so frustrating. It's classic cover up in an environmental disaster and running the people around in hopes that they don't figure it out or we all go away and nobody's none the wiser, when they are literally going to be the sitting ducks here. They will be the sitting ducks that don't know their future, that are terrified.
That's the terrorist, Erin Brockovich. Key phrases: classic cover-up. I mean, what would you call this? The EPA is suddenly now deciding to test for dioxins, which are some of the deadliest chemicals, the most carcinogenic chemicals in existence. They're suddenly testing for it 30 days later, but they're letting the train company test for it. You think the train company is going to be thoroughly testing, looking for as much of the toxin as they could find, or are they going to be looking to find as little as possible to limit legal liability? How much money did we send to Ukraine within the last hour, but we can't allot the proper amount of money for the EPA to do its own fucking testing? It's outrageous. It is a cover-up. And why don't we hear this on CNN? Why don't we hear this on MSNBC? The New York Times, the Washington Post. Our democracy dies in the darkness. These people are going to die in the light. I'm sorry to say, these people are going to get sick. They are already sick. I've been speaking. It's honestly, it's not easy to even book interviews with residents because a lot of them don't feel well. Understandably, I have booked interviews with residents to come on live, and unfortunately, before they say, sorry, I'm not feeling well, or my kid's sick. This is a humanitarian disaster. And frankly, at what point do you call it a war crime by the United States government? I don't give a shit if it's Norfolk Southern or the government. Norfolk Southern and the government, in my view, caused it, but it's the government's response that's leaving these people to fend for themselves. Erin Brockovich, classic cover-up. Chemical burns. That's what the rashes are. Holes in their throat. Talking about animals. Nothing has been really done. There was pictures and video earlier in the week. A reporter found 3 deer dead within like 100 yards of each other with no gunshots or anything. Oh, is my mom watching? Hello, Mama. With no gunshots in them. I don't know what the deer died of, but a resident said it's not very common for deer to show up all together dead by the creek. I think they drink water from the creek. That's not to mention all the fish that are dead. I think the Washington Post had a story that 43,000 animals have died. Originally, before we went there, I interviewed Taylor, who's a fox keeper. Both of his, actually maybe more than 2. I haven't spoken with him this week, but as of last week, 2 of his foxes have died. Many more were sick. And his coyotes are sick too. But cable news is literally airing the murder trial of someone I've never heard of, Alex Murdaugh. Literally, CNN the other night in primetime set up a mock jury box for their crime analysts to pontificate for an hour about Alex Murdaugh before he was convicted. Meanwhile, you got people in East Palestine, nausea, dizzy, vomiting, nosebleed, including children's, chemical burns. Their homes smell like gas stations. Can you imagine for a second if this happened in your community and you had nowhere else to go and the media came in and covered it for a week and a half, 2 weeks, and then moved on to the next shiny toy. That's why we're covering it as much as we are. I mean, this is why I've covered Flint for 7 years. Because it's still a fucking crisis. Excuse my French, Mom. It's still a crisis. But we have a media in this country that helps the government, helps the corporations cover it up. There's my mama. Colin, let's play the second Erin Brockovich clip.
And the lack of mismanagement here is unbelievable. You have, I mean, everybody's seen the pictures. The pictures I was seeing up close, what was burning, the smells. It was very overwhelming to have such a close perspective today of what they went through. And I'm still absorbing, honestly, their fear and their turmoil. And I've been on a lot of environmental situations, and I've never seen anything in my life be so mismanaged, ever. You give an all clear, but yet you don't have any data, really, to prove that it is all clear. And then when the people come back and they tell you, I'm smelling stuff, we're sick, we're going to the emergency room, I can't breathe, they're just disregarded because everything is safe. It's obvious nothing is safe yet. And then when they come back, they're told, don't drink the water. But then that changed the next day. It's okay to drink the water. So it's safe, it's not. Drink the water, it's not. You're not really experiencing what you are, yet they're sick, yet they're going to the doctor. And every time they try to get answers to the EPA is deferring to Norfolk, the very fox that's in the hen house. So this is what upsets me. And it takes me all the way back to my days in Hinckley, California. We have another environmental disaster, another corporate cover-up. I'm sorry, something is not right here. Agency failures and a really great community of really great people that deserve answers, and not just leave them here sitting and guessing what their future will be. And getting this information takes time. You guys are around town, they're doing all this aeration that could be throwing chemicals into the air. You just had independent testing come out that shows it's in the air.
By the way, Erin Brockovich was about 45 minutes late to her own press conference because she was feeling symptoms from inhaling this shit. More than I've never seen anything in my life so mismanaged. And she has been to, this is not her first rodeo, and she's been to a lot of these sites. Never seen anything more mismanaged. You give an all clear, but you don't have any data really to prove that it is all clear. They literally brought these residents back after 48 hours. Why? So that the train company that caused the fucking bomb could continue moving. Because the train company by law cannot move through an evacuated city. Think of that. These people were traumatized. We spoke with one resident whose asthmatic son was projectile vomiting and violently shaking before the control release, just from the fire. And they brought these residents, they didn't evacuate the whole town. They brought them back just to let the train company continue moving, i.e., they don't want the train company to lose any more profit. What kind of sick country is that? I don't have the flag behind me for shits and giggles. We live in the United Corporations of America. Others have used it. They are using this as a sacrifice zone. Colin, speaking of Norfolk Southern, do we have the clip, Lewis on the ground? We published this yesterday, I think, where residents are waiting online to get their crumbs, their $1,000 reimbursement. They're waiting online for hours and then getting turned away because they didn't bring their Social Security ID, which they weren't told to brought in the first place. If we have that, let's play it.
I asked them what all I needed to bring for this. I brought my elderly parents with me because they own the house that I live in. They said you needed your driver's license, 2 proofs of residency, utility bills. We get in there like a lot of other people, and now they're saying Social Security cards. While I'm sitting inside there, I call the number again, and the lady says driver's license and utility bills. Never mentioned anything about Social Security card. So a whole bunch of us from this line that waited out here all morning, we all left because of a Social Security card. They couldn't say that on the phone. That's not an inconvenience. Like, we're not going through enough.
Right.
I'm just like, I'm upset.
And like Jesus, you've got 2 proofs of that you live in the house. You've got your
everything. Like, they need a Social Security number. If it's that important, they should say that when you call on the phone. Right. And that's 2 separate people, because a guy answered on Saturday and a woman answered today. But that gentleman in there is saying you have to have a Social Security card or you don't get any money. That should be important. When you call, that should be important. Social Security card. Right. So, and I have foster children. They don't give us Social Security cards for foster children. So that's just an inconvenience. So anybody that's coming down here for the inconvenience, make sure you have your Social Security card or something with your Social Security number on it, because if not, you're not going to get any help.
And I guess this is not your first time here, it sounded like, too, right? So what was the process last time?
The last time it was mostly just about cleaning supplies and water and assistance with that, which they didn't really care who it was. You didn't have to really give. It was just a matter of getting people help. I think a lot of that came from the churches. So a lot of people didn't even really need to be from the area. If you just needed help, they were going to help you anyways. But that was a great help. But this is about money. And I get it, they got to cross their T's and dot their I's. But that should be something that, since it's the...
What's next? They have to draw blood to get their $1,000 check? They got to give you their blood? Do men have to give a sperm sample? It's absurd. First of all, it's absurd that they're only getting $1,000. What is that going to do? $1,000? When many of these folks are going to have to replace all of their furniture, which is contaminated. A lot of folks have to toss out, their memorables. They're cutting people off for past a couple days at a hotel, but residents are still staying at hotels because their home smells like a gas station. Colin, let's play, and great work by Lewis, by the way, who we are sending back. As of now, we're sending him back in a week and a half. So that's why we are pushing so hard for almost 700 people watching. If you can, sign up as a Status Coup member. It costs money to do real independent reporting on the ground. I've been to Flint almost 20 times. Trust me, it costs money. Flights, hotels, rent-a-cars, paying our reporters. I just sent to Colin and Lewis today to buy specific respirators. So when they're there, they're protected. That costs money too. So if you join us, you're not joining us, and the money is not going to play roulette. It's going to on-the-ground reporting. StatusCoup.com/join. You can become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. I also want to play this clip, if you missed yesterday's show, from Stella, who is been living in East Palestine most of her life. Her granddaughters are sick. Her daughter is sick. And listen to what Norfolk Southern is doing in response to this.
I was downtown for about an hour yesterday. I got really dizzy. I came home. I've had a headache ever since. I was up all night in the bathroom, sick at my stomach. My feet are numb. Around my lips are tingling. My grandkids have been sick now for about 2 weeks. They live, their mom's taken them out of town a couple of different times, but the railroad refused to reimburse her for the hotel anymore. After the 13th, they won't reimburse anymore. She took them to Mercy Health here in town, and they were diagnosed with chemical burns on their skin, their throats. They diagnosed my daughter with chemical bronchitis, and I actually have the papers here in front of me, and they actually say due to chemical exposure, it says that sore throats exposed to a creek contaminated by the spill occurred in East Palestine. They live really close to this creek. I am just absolutely livid at what's going on. I don't understand how it takes a scientist to tell somebody that when they're pumping toxic water out of the creek and it is spraying out of the pumps, there has not been a toxic water sign posted. They were storing toxic chemicals, materials, I don't know whether it was water or dirt, in our park, huge containers the whole way around. To the entrance of the park, they had one of those pumps in the creek. Yeah. Now, this is Sulphur Run, the creek that's the most contaminated, that runs underneath our whole city. They were spraying it out there. There's kids riding their bikes past there, going to the park, people pushing baby strollers around the park.
And by the way, her daughter, I spoke with her daughter today. So Stella's daughter, her daughter, has a fever, coughing, and puking. That was this morning. So Stella's granddaughter, our interview with her was yesterday. As of this morning, her granddaughter had a fever, was coughing, and puking. Her mother told me. Norfolk Southern, because Stella's daughter's home was right by this contaminated creek. They left to go to a hotel because their home is unsafe. It's right next to this contaminated creek. It's unsafe to breathe in the air. Norfolk Southern would only reimburse them for 4 days of a hotel. 4 days. Now you know why I call it the United Corporations of America. Smash that like button. Share this live stream. Welcome new Status Coup member. Kerry just signed up. So welcome, Kerry. Again, statuscoup.com/join. Keep signing up. And by the way, separate from paid membership, we're about to hit 137,000 subscribers on YouTube. We are 11 subscribers away from hitting 137,000. So if you're not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. I want to get to some of the moments last night. There was a town hall in East Palestine. Again, this is a month later. Residents are sick. They are fed up. They have been getting the runaround, as Erin Brockovich described. Being told to call this number, you call this number, they tell you to call this number. You call the EPA, they tell you to call the state EPA. The state EPA tells you to call Norfolk Southern. You get Norfolk Southern on the phone, they tell you basically nothing. So this town hall last night, which was put on the EPA, as far as I know, it was not advertised that Norfolk Southern was going to have somebody there. But Norfolk Southern had one of its lobbyists. You just can't make this up. One of its lobbyists there to speak. So I don't know what order we're going to go in, Colin, but you could start firing up some of the clips that Zaina put together, and we'll respond to it.
I know many of you have questions about dioxins. EPA has and will continue to sample for indicator chemicals which, based on test results to date, suggest a low probability for release of dioxins from this incident. That being said, we have heard from you. We've heard directly from the community, and we understand your concern about dioxins. So I'm here tonight that EPA will require Norfolk Southern to sample directly for dioxins under our oversight, and we will direct the company to conduct immediate cleanup if contaminants from the derailment are found at levels that jeopardize people's health. This action builds on EPA's bipartisan efforts alongside our local, state, and federal partners to earn the trust of this community and to ensure that all residents have the reassurances they need and deserve to feel safe at home once again. And I've got good news about another high priority. I've heard from many residents who feel that the community can't truly heal as long as contamination remains at the derailment site. EPA and our partners in the Unified Command are in the process of approving Norfolk Southern's plan to remove the railroad tracks and to excavate the contaminated soil at the accident site. The sooner they dig it up.
I can't listen to anymore. I can't listen to anymore. By the way, that was Deborah Shore. She's the head of EPA, I think, Region 5. Colin, come on for a second. God forbid, Colin, if somebody you love was killed by a police officer, would you think it's okay for the police officer who shot the gun at your loved one to be handling the crime scene, intaking the weapons and putting them in, lockup? You think the officer who shot your loved one should be anywhere near that crime scene?
No, and I would assume that any opportunity that they would get, they would just alter the evidence, even if it's only slightly, because any edge would be helpful.
Am I in the Twilight Zone? I mean, it's outrageous. What? I don't even want to get into Russia and Ukraine and how much money we're spending in other parts of the world. Does the EPA, is the EPA on the ramen noodle diet? Does the EPA not have money to do its own testing? Also, why is they approving Norfolk Southern's plan for the cleanup? I don't know if all of you know this, so let me just give you a little information here. There's two types of declarations. There's a federal disaster declaration and there's a emergency declaration. So the governor of Ohio, or in the case of Flint, they are the ones that would request for the federal government to issue a disaster declaration or an emergency declaration. A disaster declaration is the federal government taking over. It is above a state of emergency. The disaster declaration means FEMA comes in, the Army Corps of Engineers comes in, a whole lot of money comes in, the feds take over. An emergency, a state of emergency is much more narrow. It's still the state in control, some federal resources, but not enough. Flint, Obama declined a disaster declaration.
One moment. Jordan does this sometimes. Should be back any second.
Back.
There we go.
Sorry about that. Legally, Obama said a natural disaster, a disaster declaration could only be for natural disasters like hurricanes, tornado, whatever. I think that's absurd. The law should change. But the same thing here, they have not issued a disaster declaration. The Army Corps of Engineers should be the one handling the cleanup, putting the tracks back together, aerating or any of this stuff, not the rail company who caused the bomb to go off. It is common sense that the rail company cannot be trusted. It is a conflict of interest. Any heightened levels that they find, it would behoove them to fudge the numbers, because it's only going to skyrocket their legal liability for the massive class actions that are coming their way. So you don't want the police investigating themselves, and you don't want a greedy railroad company who cut every corner and caused the accident to be doing any type of testing. So if we had any journalists in America, maybe they could ask the EPA, why aren't you doing all the testing? Why is the railroad company involved at all? It's absurd. Absolutely absurd. Let's play the next clip, Colin.
I'm sorry that the Representative Johnson has already gone. He says to reach out, but he still has not returned my phone call. I'd also like to ask him how much funding he gets for his campaigns for the railroad. So that question isn't for you all, and he can answer that later.
Well, I will answer that question for you. Everything he got donated, he donated back to the fire department.
I didn't ask that. I said, why didn't he return my phone call? Why haven't you returned my phone call, Mayor? I sent you messages and asked you, I stopped in your office, which by the way is atrocious that you're making those women work in there with that smell.
First of all, ma'am, I'm not making anybody work anywhere.
Well, what else are you going to do?
You need to educate yourself how this town works.
Educate myself?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't need you to educate me, Mr. Mayor, but I'll go ahead and finish. You never returned my message after the town hall, and you also never responded when I asked you to do a youth town hall with our nonprofit organization. Instead of working with the community and actually attending our town hall, you decided to feed our kids the Kool-Aid and have the EPA there. I never had an issue until that. You did not respond to me. But besides, that's not...
I will not go anywhere where there's attorneys present.
There wasn't attorneys present.
It was put on by River Valley Organizing. I am yes. I am my number one goal is the citizens of this town, and I'm not going to be involved.
Which attorney? Which attorney was there?
I have no idea. Every other meeting.
We didn't. Right. No, we haven't had attorneys at any of our meetings.
And I went to the school. I'm sorry I didn't go.
Check yourself. We didn't have attorneys. We're not affiliated with attorneys. We're not trying to get anything here. We're here for the community, and we're from the community. We had independent scientists there. And there was one attorney there that was giving legal advice, not taking representation. They weren't trying to get anybody's money. They were trying to tell people simply what their rights were. We were trying to give them answers that weren't coming from the EPA and that weren't coming from Norfolk Southern.
Do you have a question for somebody on the stage that they can answer?
Well, maybe. I don't know. They're all scientists. They're sitting up here telling us nothing's wrong. I want you to tell me why everybody in my community is getting sick.
I want the same answers.
Why am I sitting here? Well, then let's get them. Why am I sitting here?
But everybody has to make 15-minute statements. I'm sorry.
All right.
We're doing the best we can here.
Okay.
And by the way, just so everybody knows, I tried to keep my cool and now I've lost it, and I apologize. I'm a part-time mayor. I have to feed my family too.
I understand.
So that was Jamie Koza, who she's the daughter of Stella, who we interviewed yesterday. She lives by the creek. Her daughter is having nausea, dizziness, and she was pissed off at the mayor. And, you know, I kind of understand it both ways. The mayor, what's the mayor going to do? He's a small town mayor. Like he said, he's a part-time mayor. He's in way over his fucking head. I can't really blame the mayor because the mayor doesn't have power to drag Norfolk Southern screaming. The mayor does not have federal power. The mayor is basically the mayor is at the mercy of the EPA, the federal government, and the company. And should he be calling back residents? Sure. I'm not trying to defend the mayor. I just understand that, you could hear that the mayor has probably not been sleeping. He's under an enormous amount of stress. But I also don't blame Jamie and the residents who are saying, where are the answers? If the EPA is sitting up here saying, I understand your concern, but all the testing is coming back normal, will somebody answer then why are our kids getting nosebleeds? Why are we dizzy? Why are we having headaches? Why are drivers swerving because they feel like they're drunk?
Momentary.
Sorry, I still need to call. Am I back?
Yes, you're back now.
Sorry, I apparently need to keep calling my internet provider because we're going down from time to time. But I understand both ways. I understand the mayor's frustration, but I certainly understand the residents' frustrations too, because they didn't ask for this and they're not getting answers from the EPA. They're not getting answers for why they're all sick. And they're certainly not getting answers for who's going to help them if they want to leave, because they don't have the money to leave. For those that say, get out of there, well, if you have somewhere for them to go, get in touch with them. Let's play some more.
My name is Joshua Figley. I live on 131 South Market Street, and I have a family of 5, sometimes 6. I've spent the last 15 years trying to build myself up, and I've been, putting everything we got into our home, into our house. I lived here my entire life. I love this town. Every one of you people up there are just like me. You are doing the best you can, and we know that. But you know, just like we know, what happened here was catastrophic. It is not going to get better overnight. We have people living here. Do you live here? No. So it's not as effective to you. You can tell us and treat us like we're children, tell us about the statistics. The point is, you get a chemical disaster like this, exploding, the dioxins are so low. It's there. You can't say it's not. If that happened to your grandchildren, your children, you would pull them. But you're letting people stay here. You're covering it up. And it's not your fault. It's all protocol. We need to do something. It's not going to get better. And by the time it does, it's going to be too late. These people, some people don't have nowhere to go. Some don't have the means. I have my family of 5 living in a 1-bedroom right now at my brother's house. All of us on a blow-up mattress. Because I'm not stupid. But that's the only place I got. I can't afford to go nowhere. Why? Because I have a home. I own it. I put my life into it. No, there's no answer for the questions. There's not. The reality is we have to get out. I need to say that I love this town more than anybody else. I do. And I'm not saying don't come back, but you can't live here while the cleanup's happening because it's not going to get better until it's gone.
It's always the same thing. I've seen it in Flint and I've seen it elsewhere. These government officials, these EPA officials, they don't live in the communities that have been poisoned. They show up throwing out a lot of platitudes at these town halls, and then they go home where their water is safe, their air is safe, and their soil is safe, and their children are safe. If the EPA wants to tell everybody how safe everything is, then they should come live there for a while. Because you think the EPA officials who are on the ground in East Palestine are staying in East Palestine? I could put a lot of money on they're not. If it's so safe, come live with the residents. Shower in the water, drink the water, and play in the soil with the kids. Prove it. This is why I say this is a humanitarian disaster, and it's also, in my view, a war crime on the people committed by the federal government and the corporation. And by the way, there's different types of fascism, and it's not all Nazis running around. There's something called corporate fascism, and this is it. The uniting of the government and the corporate state. Keep smashing that like button, please. We got 720 people watching. If any of you are not members yet, sign up, statuscoup.com/join. We are sending Lewis back to East Palestine probably in a week. What's the date? Let me make sure I have the right date. Yeah, we're sending him back in about a week to East Palestine because we believe that the story needs to be covered, not when it's hot, not when the smoke is fresh in the air, but it needs to be continued to be covered long after the national media cameras leave. But that costs money and resources, cameraman, reporters, flights, hotels, rent-a-car, equipment. I just sent Colin and Lewis the respirators they need to get to be safe there. So if you can join Status Coup, is it statuscoupmember.com/join or statuscoup? I think statuscoup.com/join is working now, Colin. I think you can put up.
Oh, yeah. I forgot that
it's working.
There. But
statuscoup.com/join. You could become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. The more members we get to sign up, the less we have to rely on YouTube. We don't have to worry about advertisers. We don't take money from corporations or big donors. And we can continue to stay on the ground, not just in East Palestine, but other places. I want to go back to Flint in April. There's a lot of other stories we want to cover, but money don't grow on trees. So if you want to see real independent on-the-ground reporting, help us out. StatusCoup.com/join. Let's play whatever other clips you have from last night's town hall call.
We'll start the north track, and we'll be done by the end of April.
The only other question I got for this, and in all honesty, if this happened in a richer neighborhood, richer town, let's say a Perry neighborhood, would it have been cleaned up a lot faster?
Sir, I'm going to tell you that we really have never had an accident like this in my career. Okay? So, still want me or?
Yeah, just like Josh Figley, you know, I've put my heart and soul into my house up here on the hill, you know. The firefighters know that the smoke in a fire is the evidence of like unburned fuel. Like smoke can catch on fire, right? Like the smoke can catch on fire. That's the evidence of unburned fuel. That's wind came straight north. I have a huge garden. I raise all my animals. Like I feed my family from my property. And I feed my family from work, which I worked at Stroke Hectors. And the skin fell off my hands from grabbing the machines when I went back to work. And I couldn't breathe, and I quit my job. So now I can't provide for them that way, and I don't have the garden, and nobody wants to test at my place. So Wednesday spring, like that, it was like a cave at my house. I took the kids away, and I had to come back and check on them. And it was as black as you couldn't see this without a flashlight. I filled up my wood burner, and I just went back home, or to my mom's house.
Have you called any of the numbers for soil testing?
I've called every number that there is, because I lost my job over this, and I have all the time in the world.
Well, if you'd like to give me your information, I'll call you tomorrow, and we'll talk about this.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure. Okay, I appreciate that. But no, what effects from the smoke and like people that are losing their jobs? Like, I guess.
Lawsuit. 10 years. Buy him out of his house.
What do I do? Everything I've put into it. I don't make that much.
So that's the Norfolk Southern lobbyist on stage and a resident talking about really kitchen table issues, particularly farmland as well. Is the next one. Residents get heated. Let's play that one.
My name is Scott Snyder, and I guess I'll wrap this up tonight. I'd like an acknowledgement from people up there on the stage that we're not all the same. Our makeup is not the same. The chemicals in the atmosphere could be affecting people differently. So people that have symptoms, they shouldn't be dismissed. They should be looked at, and we shouldn't be here. I'd like to know why we were allowed to come home and why we haven't been removed from just out of an abundance of caution, because we've heard that phrase over and over and over. In fact, it was in Governor DeWine's email update today, out of an abundance of caution. Out of an abundance of caution, get some people out of here who are having trouble. Put them somewhere else where they can be safe and they can feel better. Amen. What's happened is not right. People are suffering for it.
That's what you want to say here. You're the one on the shop floor. Let's go.
Can you state your name and title, please, sir?
My name is Daryl Wilson. I'm part of the team that's here trying to work on the response and recovery.
Part of what team?
Part of the Norfolk Southern team that's here.
Team of what?
So, what's your specific question?
Where's Alan?
Has there been any talk about relocating people?
There is not.
Why? Why is that? Whose call would that be?
I don't know whose call that will be.
Would your company be willing to pay for it if the EPA found it necessary?
What I'm going to state on this topic is right now, this will be an evolving conversation that's going to go on for quite a while. All right? We are going to make data-driven decisions. Okay? And we're going to continue to collect data, and to work with the partners at the Incident Command to look at all of that to make the right decisions. And going forward, we will make it right.
We're losing students from the school district. The kids are coming into this school. They have symptoms. They get symptoms sometimes increase when they're in school. Teachers are having symptoms. People do not feel safe. I think that we should be shutting things down temporarily out of an abundance of caution. Last thing I would say, I would like to thank our first responders for doing a great job. And I'm very appreciative.
I live in Ground Zero. My house is 900 feet from that burn site, and I have not seen one of you. Nobody. I have not seen our mayor. I have not seen anybody come to my home where I have children and I have grandchildren. There are 6 houses right there on Taggart Street, and not one of you have had the guts to come out there to see if we are okay. We have not seen FEMA out there to give me a flyer that they've given everybody on the other side of town. Thank you. Nobody comes to us. Nope, not one. Do I have to wait until I have cancer, or my kids are sick, or my grandkids are sick before you guys are going to do anything? That's not right. You flooded my yard a couple days ago. They flooded my backyard. They left the waste in mine. They left the waste in mine. I have a substance across my grass. They sent somebody out to test. But I have to wait. My family's sick. I have to wait until you guys get them test results back before you guys are going to come and do anything to help me. But I haven't seen anybody. Nobody's out there. You work for the EPA. We should not be living there. We are close enough to that place that we should not be there. I don't have the means to remove my family, or we would have been gone. And now I'm getting backlash from everybody else saying you should be gone, you shouldn't be there. How do I get out? How do I move? I didn't choose to park the train in my backyard. I did not choose to set that thing on fire. That was not a choice of mine. It's not a choice of mine that I have to leave my family there either. Why nobody is up there helping us.
Norfolk decides to let us go here, so by the way, to 70 miles from each. That'd be too much. Or like, were those things with the options of respond, or
excuse me, I haven't said one time I've real public spoken person. One thing I would like to approach to this community tonight is we're under this together. I'm one of you. I'm God-fearing, I'm hard-working, been here 30 years. I love this place. I don't like where we're at. I don't want to insult anyone. What I would like to know is this. I have most of my farm paid for. I went to the bank, and this is to you, look me in the eye. I can't hit you with my pocketbook. I can't touch you with anything other than my heart. I want out, and the bank will not lend me money. The insurance companies today said they're going to put a moratorium on insurance in East Palestine and Natalie. And listen to me, please. My grandchildren, my children want out. It's not safe here, sir. We're sick. I don't want your money. I want the ability to farm my own money. Yeah. When you go home tonight, like you bleed, you breathe, you are no different than any other man. I want to be as close to you as I can, sir. If you want our trust, Mr. DeWine was asked yesterday. He was directly asked, are the workers on the railroad safe? Am I right or wrong? There was a railroad union worker that came forward to represent the railroad. He said that they're suffering from the same symptoms, Mr. Chang. We are not imagining this. This is not something we asked for, sir. I'm begging you, by the grace of God, please get our people out of here. Yes. And please don't. That's all I have to say.
That train derailed from Niagara.
It's hard to even come up with the words. It's hard to even come up with the words. And you know what I'm thinking? One of the first thoughts in my head. Why was that not airing on every single news outlet in America? That was not airing on NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, PBS. You don't think they have the cameras to put in that room? They were airing deliberations of a murder trial of some oligarch in South Carolina. Most of those channels. Was convicted of killing his wife and child, domestic abuse. Not that domestic violence is an important topic, not that it shouldn't be covered. But over this, over nuking a town, and again, it's going to be much further than East Palestine. And right after that gentleman literally begged him for help, the Norfolk lobbyists, because they sent a lobbyist, told the residents, we will not be evacuating you. We will not be evacuating you, i.e., we're not paying. We're not going to spend the money to bring you to safety. It's kind of the equivalent of, you know, you're drowning in the ocean and the Coast Guard or, you know, whomever comes to save you and kind of like puts their hand out as you're treading water and about to drown and then takes it away. We're not going to save you. Federal government's not going to save them either. And by the way, if you're a Native American watching or you're a poor black person that's had corporations dumping their waste on your backyard in your neighborhood, because most of the corporate pollution in this country, most of the corporations are dumping near native reservations, poor black communities, poor brown communities, poor white communities. This is familiar to you. But these people are begging. And that first gentleman asked, why are we still here? Why did you allow us to stay? And the answer is,
but I have to say we're capitalist, and that's just the way it is. But I have to say we're capitalist, and that's just the way it is.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
I could go on for another 3 hours. We have more clips to play. I do have to go. Got a daddy time. Help my wife out with my newborn. We're going to stay on this story. We're not going to stop on this story. I don't know of a bigger story in the country than two states, because this has affected people in Pennsylvania. The wind took it far and wide. I don't think it's dramatic to say this could be similar to Love Canal, could be similar to Agent Orange. I think that we're looking probably at a cancer alley that is far and wide. I'm sorry if you're watching from East Palestine. I'm not trying to diagnose you. I'm not trying to scare you, but we have to be realistic. These people have inhaled some of the worst chemicals that exist, and they were allowed to inhale this. They were allowed for their children to play in this contaminated soil, near this contaminated water, to breathe this. Where is President Biden? I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican, a neoliberal, a neoliberal or a libertarian or a conservative. Where the hell is the President of the United States? Forget if he's going to visit. Where is his leadership? Why is his EPA, from the looks of it, engaged in a massive cover-up? Why is his government not relocating these people? Why is his government not demanding that this corporation that operates in the United States relocate these people? I don't give a shit if people criticize him for big government. This is the time you need big government. The Ohio governor has blame too here, who's been lying to the public. Check out that video. We have a video up on the channel, 4.5 minutes of his lies, exposing his lies and contradictions about this whole thing. Read some super chats. Tony, $2. Major kudos for interviewing railroad workers. Absolutely. Thank you, Tony. Another $2. So America poisons itself for money. Yeah. Not itself. The government of oligarchs and rich people poison the peasants for money. YouTube 1984, $4.99. Keep up the good work. God bless you. Why, thank you. Double K, $19.99. Thank you so much, Double K. Proxia, $10. Super sticker. Appreciate it. Just Isaac, $4.99. The mayor of East Palestine should ask for emergency medical help from Doctors Without Borders and from the Republic of Cuba. They would actually help. I don't think he's going to be asking for the Republic of Cuba. It's a pretty right-wing area, but you're not wrong. And Cuba would treat its people much better than the United States is treating the people of East Palestine. Peace, $5. Jordan has internet run by Norfolk Southern, quote. Thank you for all your work and everyone at Status Coup. Stay safe reporting. Yeah, I gotta call. Where I live, it's another internet monopoly, and they suck. Dave L, $5. MSNBC's coverage is missing in action, and NPR's coverage is just as bad. They're all terrible. And by the way, let's acknowledge the coastal bias, because if this happened in New York City, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., they'd be covering it nonstop because that's where the media lives, and it would affect them. They'll cover it if it affects them and their children. If it affects poor people in the Midwest, poor white people, poor black people, poor brown people, sayonara. We'll come for a week, then we'll provide updates from time to time, and then we'll just forget it happened and declare it over and better and move on. That's the media in this country. That's why we created and launched Status Coup 5 years ago, because we need a journalistic, nonviolent coup d'etat of the status quo. Thank you, new members, Joanne, Jeffrey, Linda. I think I saw some other ones too. Let me make sure. Maureen signed up. Linda signed up. Alan signed up. Jeffrey signed up. Joseph signed up. Joanne signed up. So that's 5 or 6 new Status Coup members. I am not beyond begging, folks. Please, please, if it is within your budget, if you can't afford it, we totally understand. If it is within your means to sign up as a Status Coup paying member, that's statuscoup.com/join. You can become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Your membership funds are on the ground and investigative reporting. As I always say, on the ground reporting is not cheap, but we're going to do it as long as you help us keep the lights on. So your membership is what helps pay for the flights, the hotels, the rent-a-car, paying our reporters, paying our camera people, paying everyone else behind the scenes. So consider becoming a member, statuscoup.com/join. And we're going to do our monthly members call next week. We do a monthly members call through Zoom. So once you become a member, you will get the email next week to join our call on Zoom. It's usually for an hour and a half, 2 hours. It's a lot of fun. We take your questions, comments, concerns, probably tell you way too much information and all that good stuff. And keep coming back this weekend, because we actually have more interviews and content from Lewis's on-the-ground reporting in East Palestine that we will be uploading and publishing this weekend. And of course, if news breaks, we'll come live over the weekend. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Colin, behind the scenes, Zaina. And we will see you back here. Again, videos this weekend and back live on Monday.